that is strong. And you know why? It's a fortified wine. Stick around to learn more. Hello again, I'm Annie Shapiro, certified sommelier, and DiVino Wine School is back in session. Today is day 20 and it is hot. Are you ready to talk about fortified wines? If so, let's go. The world of fortified wines is vast and fascinating. I brought a sherry, for example, which is just one of many hundreds of fortified wines out there to discover. If you are subscribed or enrolled, you might have some wine as well. Feel free to pour yourself some and let it breathe. As usual, I also brought some scent notes to help train our noses, including honey, tobacco, and dried dates. These are all common scent notes in sherry and several other fortified wines. While you're pouring that wine, now is a great time to remind you to subscribe to this channel, and it may be day 20, but you can still enroll and get a free copy of all the class notes and find out what we're doing on day 21. Our series, 21 Days to Wine, may be rounding the finish line, but I have a lot more to share with you, and I'm sure you have questions. Fill up my comments section, and you never know, you might inspire my next video. So, we have been talking about all the steps to a multisensory evaluation of wine. But as you know, there are exceptions to every rule. Fortified wines fall outside the standard tasting method because, as their name implies, they are fortified. Something has been added to make them stronger. In this case, that thing is distilled liquor, usually brandy. As you may recall from science, alcohol is volatile, so those volatile aromatic compounds get an extra lift. So fortified wines are not only more alcoholic, but they are also intensely aromatic. The added alcohol also gives fortified wines a longer shelf life, so you can buy a nice one and keep it for weeks or months and not worry about drinking it right away. So, what are some examples of fortified wines and how are they made? A few examples of fortified wines include Madeira, port, sherry, vermouth, marsala, and banyuls. They range in color and degree of sweetness, but something they share is an intense and complex aromatic spectrum. It includes things like dried fruit and honey and leather and tobacco and sweet spices, caramel, and burnt sugar. We could spend hours on the details of fortified wine production and the grapes utilized for each one, but I'm going to do my best to sum it up. Essentially, a distilled spirit is added during or after fermentation. When you add alcohol to fermenting grapes, it kills the yeast and stops fermentation. So going back to science, when fermentation stops, you have sugar left over. On the other hand, the longer fermentation goes on, the more flavors and aromas have a chance to develop, like in this sherry. Even just in sherry, the flavor profile and the process vary tremendously, as they do in all fortified wines. So I want to give you a basic idea of what to expect and how to taste and talk about fortified wines. Production of fortified wines can be traced back to the 1600s. Under English imperial rule, wine traders on the southern coast of Italy, Spain, and Portugal devised ways of transporting the sweet and aromatic wines they found along the coast back home. Adding brandy or other distilled liquor stopped the wines from going bad or re-fermenting during the long ride home. During the journey, the wines also had a chance to oxidize in oak barrels as they made their way across the sea. The combination of oxidation, aromas, and the added brandy that made the whole thing possible in the first place became extremely popular, and before long, the production of fortified wines exploded. Over time, like any wine appellation, laws were put into place to protect the style and the grapes that were used in the production. That is why within the whole family of fortified wines, you have varying degrees of sweetness and dryness, different aromas, as well as standards on aging and quality. One thing they all share is some degree of oxidation, as barrels are rarely filled to the top during their months or years of aging. How does oxidation translate to aroma in wine tasting? Depending on how long the wines are aged and oxidized, they take on earthy and mature aromas, like dried fruit and leather and dark spices and tobacco. The spectrum of aromas is vast and complex and often sweet. It all depends on when they added distilled liquor and when the fermentation stopped and how much sugar was left over. For example, Sherry Fino and Manzanilla are almost dry and have citrusy, crisp qualities because they were fermented almost to dry white wine status before the distilled liquor was added. Whereas this Pedro Ximénez sherry is made from super overripe sugary grapes and aged for years in oak barrels. It has lush aromas of dried fruit like dates and honey and sits like satin on your palate. That is what makes fortified wines like this one so great with a cheese plate. You know all those things they bring you, dried fruit and nuts and honey? You've got all those flavors right here. Another cool thing about fortified wines is they have all this aroma and seem quite sweet on the nose, but that added alcohol keeps them fresh, which means they are often much more crisp and balanced and clean on the palate than they might seem. If you brought a sweet sherry like this one to the lesson today and you happen to have some cheese lying around, like most civilized people do, put them together and let me know how it goes in the comments. That is a perfect warm-up to our last episode ever, Day 21, an introduction to food and wine pairing. See you then.